Today, I have some truly terrible news. And yes, we're wearing the dressing gown again. Because the last video I talked about while wearing the dressing gown, we somehow got 500,000 views in a single day. I'm hoping that wearing this is a cheat code, like how YouTubers would put the Vivo watermark on the bottom left right of their thumbnail. The bottom left right. So what's happened recently is the developers behind the Saints Row games, Volition, have shut down. They've disbanded. So basically, they put out a statement that their managers kind of assessed the situation, saw that Volition kind of fell off, and for that reason, they are going to be closed immediately and effectively. Not even like next year. It wasn't like a telltale situation where it's like, oh, we'll give you some time to wrap everything up. No, they are shutting everything down right now. So for me personally, this really sucks. I mean, recently, Volition have been awful. I'm sure many of you have seen the Saints Row reboot. I mean, even I played it on stream a while ago. It was absolutely awful. Okay, I tell you what, guys. Are you joking?
Bloody fucking shite.
Yep, I agree. I actually agree. This game is just terrible. I played that game on the highest difficulty, and I can guarantee that absolutely no one at Volition actually play tested it because enemies were bullet sponges. The game was basically unplayable, and to beat the mandatory tutorial, I basically had to resort to cheating. Also, not to mention in the reboot, the map itself was just the most boring place imaginable. It was basically set in like kind of a New Mexico hybrid, like Breaking Bad. You are in the same realm as Breaking Bad, and you made a game that boring. Can you imagine? What I want to do is, to anyone that's watched Breaking Bad, which I'm not sure if many of you have heard of it, it's a very small show that not a lot of people talk about. I myself barely mention it. Imagine every single transition slide in Breaking Bad when it cuts from night to day, or when it's someone driving in the car. No. You know what? Because some of the scenes in Breaking Bad when people are driving is actually interesting. Like Walter racing to find the money. Or Jesse in the go-kart. No, you know what? The Saints Row reboot, kick out Walter White, Skylar, Walter Jr., Hank, Steve Gomez, cut out everyone from the show so you just have Marie Schrader, Hank's wife, that like stole some shoes in the first season. Just have that. That is the entire Saints Row reboot. It is so boring to play. I couldn't even enjoy Let's Plays of the game. I remember Critical playing it as well, and he was bored out of his mind.
I have to wonder, who is this feature for? Why would they allow you to limit the top speed to something so abominably slow?
But the reason why I'm talking about it is because the older Saints Row entries, especially 1 and 2, were goated. They were so good. Type in right now, open up Discord. I know you've got it. You're a degenerate. You watch me. Go onto Discord GIFs and type in its peak. And if it's the black guy looking down, shaking his head, that is Saints Row 1 and 2. They were peak. I remember playing the original Saints Row when it came out in like 2006. I think I was an actual 10-year-old, like oldest Mr. Beast viewer. And that game was so good. I mean, going back and playing it right now, it probably doesn't hold up. It's probably a little bit bare bones, but there was so much you could do in that game. Like, for example, you can go into a gun store, you can go into a liquor store, you can actually hold them up, rob them blind, let them crack the safe, steal the money, and then get out of there. It allowed so much experimentation, but you couldn't even do that in the reboot because when you went into a store, you just couldn't shoot them. You couldn't do anything. There was no interaction.
Can I say that'll cost you an extra 50? Whoa! Yeah.
I don't want this! Come on in, look around, buy something, discuss the rights of our furry friends and how the man can... Here it is. Just don't hurt me.
Now, the funny thing is about Saints Row 1, and it's very hard to believe this, at the time, it was actually considered a GTA competitor. I'm not going to throw out the GTA killer buzzword because that's used way too much, but it was a legitimate competitor to the point that GTA actually ended up stealing stuff from Saints Row. Do you remember, for example, in GTA 4, how Nico could pull up his phone? That Saints Row did that first. Saints Row had a phone that you could use to call phone numbers, call contacts, homies in the game. It had a lot of features, and GTA basically straight up saw that. They were like, okay, that's pretty good. We'll yoink that. And then by Saints Row 2, Volition kind of realized, okay, we've got a good franchise here. We probably can't compete with GTA 4 because of just how monolithic the scale is. And also Take-Two, their publisher, just has infinite amounts of money, probably from the mafia, to just throw into this game. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make the game a little bit more ironic, a little bit more sarcastic, a little bit more self-aware. So that's why in Saints Row 2, you had really bizarre missions, like one called, I think, Septic Avenger, where basically you would get in a truck and drive around, and the truck was filled with human excrement, and you would use a hose to spray down everyone everyone in the excrement. I also played a fair amount of Saints Row 3, Saints Row the Third. That's kind of when I was becoming more of like a teenager though, and I just didn't really kind of enjoy those games anymore. I was too busy sinking my hours into such legendary classics like Viva Pinata. And then after Saints Row 3, that's when they really jumped the shark. Like I think in the 4th game you became president, but honestly, I've only played the first 3 games, and from what I've heard is the general consensus, after the 3rd game, the rest were kind of mid. It wasn't peak anymore. Now, the incredibly sad thing about this whole situation is like Volition almost kind of brought it upon themselves. So there have been so many people just shilling and defending Volition constantly. Like for example, this tweet here of a guy with a Homelander video saying, fake Saints Row fans when the woke reboot is a financial success and Volition doesn't go out of business. And the community notes, as we know on Twitter, came in to save the day basically saying, yep, they shut down. Now, obviously, as each game got a little bit less popular, they still sold relatively well, but the Saints Row reboot, it sold awfully. I still actually remember like when the game dropped after like a month, Volition and Deep Silver, their publisher, kind of realized, okay, this is not doing good. This is selling absolutely terribly. There was even an article that came out all the way back in February saying Saints Row sales flop forces parent company to change its policy on new games. Imagine having to reinvent your entire business model because one game flopped. This is like Sprite putting all of their budget into like that Christmas flavor that they bring out every single year, and then that flops as well. The scary thing is though, reading this article back in February, they're basically saying that we've therefore increased management focus and efforts to optimize investments and efficiency across the group even further. Each project has to earn the right to exist. I'd like to imagine that Deep Silver, they just birth a child, like it gets pushed straight out the womb into the real world. What job can you offer? What proficiencies do you have? Do you have 9 or 10 intelligence? And then if the baby fails, they just get thrown out the window. You know what? That was the plot of 300. Does no one remember that with Leonidas' Spartans? If the Spartans had any kind of defect or they weren't perfect soldiers as like little babies, they were basically thrown out into the wastes. That is exactly what Deep Silver is now doing because of Saints Row. So I've also been looking at the Steam charts for the games. I mean, for example, you've got Saints Row the Third. That is pretty much dead now, but to be fair, it's literally like a 15-year-old game. That had a peak of 34,000 players just on Steam. That's not even including like PlayStation or Xbox. But then if you look at Saints Row, they've actually been getting pretty consistent player numbers. I mean, like 2,900, 2,700. But then if you look at their all-time peak on the Steam charts, it's actually nearly 3,000, which is what they got like a couple days ago. So that really just goes to show that if they only achieved a main peak player count recently, that's not very good. Now, one thing I forgot to mention as well is the fact that when this game came out, it came out as an Epic exclusive, meaning it wasn't on Steam. I do want to say, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but honestly, if a game comes out on Epic first, it is dead on arrival. There is something very, very wrong with that game if it was going to come out on Epic only and then Steam like 1 to 2 years later. Also, I'm going to be pretty transparent here. I do have some kind of like bizarre brand loyalty where like I'll enjoy a game more if it's on Steam compared to the Epic store. That is definitely some kind of mental illness and I need to get checked for it. But, you know, that's me being honest. I remember being so bad that I bought Far Cry 6 when it came out on Epic, and then I bought it again when it came out on Steam, and I still haven't beaten either version of the game. I might as well like open up a charity and just give Ubisoft all my money at this point. I'm just donating money to them, especially with 6 Siege. Now, looking at more articles like leading up to the impending doom of Volition, it was pretty sad. I mean, this IGN article, for example, of them saying, Saints Row developer not backing down after reboot backlash. No one has rebooted like this before. No, Volition, no one has rebooted like that before, when your entire company goes crashing and burning within the span of 6 months. So you could see them on Twitter just coping the whole time, saying, we're not backing down. We get it. It's new. It's like a shell shock reaction to a reboot like no other. The GIF was supposed to convey that. And then if you look at the... And the GIF itself is the Saints Row player saying haters gonna hate. Haters aren't gonna hate Volition. Haters gonna refund, which is clearly what happened here. The problem is there are 2 Saints Row fan groups. There are the new ones that came in around like Saints Row 3 onwards, and they liked the zany superpowers and how bombastic everything was. I mean, even I like Saints Row 3. It was a good game. And then you've got the older group, the boomers, people like me, that did kind of enjoy like the gritty realism of the original game, and also how the second game kind of kept that in focus, but also had a bit more of a slapstick comedy element to it. And the problem is the reboot appealed to none of these fans because it was so ridiculous. The gritty fans didn't enjoy it, the people that sit there every night watching Heath Ledger Joker compilations on TikTok. But then, because all the characters were one note, none of them were relatable, and none of them were really funny, that slapstick element was also gone as well. Like, I remember in Saints Row, I think it was 3 or it was 4, you could get a literal dubstep gun, and the different colors that you coated it in the weapon shop would actually play different dubstep music. So there was so many combinations you could do. There was nothing like that in the game. Nothing whatsoever. I think the most notable notable thing I remember was like you could buy a green screen suit and just dress up as a green screen character. The saddest thing about the whole situation is Volition was a genuinely talented company, and obviously the case is people that made Saints Row 1 and 2 and 3, by the time the reboot came around, they departed the company. It was fresh blood, it was new people, because the company's been around for like 30 years. They have been around a long time. But what's funny as well is Embracer, the company that actually shut Volition down, they tried to use like the Starfield review embargo to try and bury the news that they're actually shutting Volition down so they didn't get any hate from the community. Apparently Embracer, this company, became very bitter because they were meant to get like a $2 billion deal in like Saudi Arabia, and that fell through, and because of that they're now shutting down a lot of companies, Volition first. But yeah, overall it's a really sad situation. I think it's kind of funny how bad the reboot was, but at the same time, like Volition, in part it was kind of my childhood. I love Saints Row 1. I remember my parents coming in my room and like telling me off because I was playing a game that was like made for 18-year-olds and I was like 10. And then I remember playing Saints Row 2, the same situation, but they kind of just didn't really care anymore. They were really good games. I enjoyed them, and it sucks we're gonna lose the company because like, Jesus, man, like the reboot was actually awful.